Whilst real-world attacks on LLM applications have occurred, there hasn't really been a kind of wide-scale breach yet. But as Gen AI use cases grow in their kind of criticality and importance, it's something that's increasingly on the agenda for us to prepare for. I think it would be helpful as a kind of first question if you could each talk to some of the use cases that you're building and deploying into production, ideally both internally and externally.
So for LLMs, there's the fairly classic self-service and how to use kind of that AI chatbot. We have 1/3 of the company using it, significantly reduced our tickets. And then the other use case, it's the external, more the customer success experience. How can, instead of interacting with a call center agent, could the AI bot help to take off a lot of that work?
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Hi, everyone. For us, I'm looking at in 3 categories. I would say the first category certainly is internal, so internal productivity, places where we can improve and take time away from mundane work to more innovation. Absolutely, we are looking into those areas. The second category, I would say, is externally, so rolling it out in production, but that's where we're looking at productivity for our customers. How can we help our customers make better decisions? As a company, we are a very technical platform, which means we have a lot of documentation, content that needs to be easily explained and available. So certainly a lot of opportunities there for us to use. We are still in early phase there. And then the third category is we also serve a lot of AI customers, and their trajectory or their, you can say, journey of growth has also been an area where I am investing as well to understand their traffic shifts and what does that mean for me as a product, because virality is if virality was a thing before, it definitely is a thing now. So definitely something that I'm looking into. So those are the 3 categories I would call out.
Okay.
Yeah, the same here also. So we had a chatbot internally, which was primarily have the internal users try to understand what the documentations and answer questions and everything. We had a lot of productivity tools, including code review and code suggestions. Then on the external side, on our product, we can suggest what sort of policies to be created and review the policies and give feedback. So some of the use cases we ended up building internally.
Brilliant. All right, super helpful. Thank you. And maybe if we could start by taking some of the internal-facing use cases there. And as a very basic example, we all know that employees are increasingly using tools like ChatGPT, maybe both through enterprise and personal accounts. And so how do we think about measures that are necessary to inspect those interactions and secure sensitive information within organizations?
So the approach we've taken there, it's similar to what Bosco mentioned. We also created our own playground UI in front of ChatGPT, released that internally, and it was all about how do you incentivize the developers to use that versus going directly to a ChatGPT and expensing that. So by offering things like a prompt gallery, these are the different kinds of queries that your peers have found interesting, then it's easier for the developers to leverage the internal tool. And we've also built a set of primitives around that, so essentially an LLM gateway. So it's easier for maybe during a hackathon for developers to go ahead and create kind of LLM applications on top of that without having to go back and creating yet another API token to OpenAI.
Cool. Multiple paths here, but hackathon certainly opened the door for us. I still remember first, and I love the keynote and the tone there, because I remember first time when I started having a conversation to approve Copilot with my legal, someone there in the room, the question was, what happens if engineers start to copy this AI code as is? And I was like, well, they already do that. They do it from the internet. What do you think? So I think the realization or the fear created around the technology is just a bit overwhelming, and it needs a lot of education to help everybody understand what should be the guardrails. So yes, there are right guardrails that we have to have in place, such as PII or IP protection. So we certainly either look it into the contract with who we are trying to build that contract, or try to create or build some technology within, or control the data that they will play with. So it's a combination of all of the above. But The few places we have, the few technologies we are certainly investing in is around AWS Bedrock and Anthropic Cloud. So that whole gamut of building it, the pipeline, as well as OpenAI Enterprise. So some teams are trying things out, and we will see what helps with productivity, and we will roll that out. A couple of places where we've rolled out, it's working really well. And I would still say that it's still an early evolution phase. I don't think we're in intermediate or late ladder, so we'll see where it goes. But early phase, it's helpful. It's definitely improving and helping us save a few hours per month for sure.
Yeah. So when ChatGPT got released early on, right? So almost everyone jumped on it. Our marketing was the first one to jump on it. We were concerned. We looked into solutions in the market. We tried out, but I didn't think we found anything which could really solve it. We could have blocked the ChatGPT website, but with all the SaaS applications coming with different copilots and all that, we knew it was not going to be possible. So the alternative we did was, first we educated our employees, making sure they understand what to do, what not to do. Creating a marketing thing is fine because you're not really doing anything which is sensitive. But if you're copy pasting code, everything, we told them what they should not be doing it. The alternative we gave them was we built our own chatbot so that they can use that, and we had a good control who was using it, why they were using it. So we had a good auditability and observability. Right? So those things actually worked for us, and we also approved, just like you guys. We looked into GitHub Copilot. All our code is in GitHub anyway, so I don't know what more they can do. So we approved some of those selectively. So that's how we make sure that it's at least in a controlled fashion.
Okay, and then maybe as we're just kind of setting the scene here, switching tack and looking at more kind of external-facing use cases, what attack vectors and compliance challenges are you most concerned about in the context of generative AI use cases, and how are you building your cybersecurity strategy around that?
So the two primary ones, essentially the very obvious attackers trying to manipulate the chatbot, and we saw that example with Air Canada and how people were able to get refunds for their tickets given by the chatbot as an authorized agent. The second scenario for us, it's essentially the hallucination concern, where we offer consumers recipes and meal planning, and we don't want that chatbot to suggest you add in 10 gallons of salt into your particular recipe. So we offer all the curated recipes from the New York Times, and you'll hear more about that from them later today. So it's combining kind of deterministic information with giving that flexibility of that LLM experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for us, it's more security and compliance lens, which has to be intact for anything that goes externally. So that certainly is a tight, you can say, process or expectation that I or my team has to follow here. And primarily right now, we are able to control that because we can prioritize the right set of data to say this data set let's work with and not that data set. As we are growing and evolving, like I said, we all are in early stage, and so is the technology. So as we are learning and evolving, we will get into more data set, which is too core to us or very, very precious to us, has PII and all of that, and that is already trying to add some complexity, so we are looking at those areas to address. So that's the step we are in now, which is how do we address those aspects. And eventually, I know we will get into other aspects where we start to look at creating application, leveraging our capability around AI. And at that point, I'm sure we will have to look into more depth of what other aspects of protection we have to be in place. But since you asked that question, I think I do want to call out one aspect overall. As I was at RSA and I was talking to many people, and there was this concept of, I don't know if you all go to RSA and how many of you, but there's usually a theme that travels, and last 2 years the theme was identity, which was great. I worked for Okta. But this year the theme was AI security, which was like, every time I asked, so what does that mean? And you keep hearing the same concept of, endpoint protection and some other protections. I'm like, how is that different than any other security? And the answer usually was very vague. So just want to call out that when you're hearing AI security, that feels like another hype, but there's an aspect of conceptually as engineering leaders, if you have worked in this space and you have worked with data closely, not to put you on the spot here, but even as CISO and technology leaders, data goes behind, it's not top of mind many times because it's behind the scene, it's in the back end, so we assume that it's going to be safe already. But with this change in the AI and data being in your production or becoming part of your pipeline, there is a need to look into your data pipeline, call it, not just AI, but data pipeline overall, and see are there right security checks in those places? And that definitely is a shift. Now, the concept AI security that I heard in RSA did not cover that. Nonetheless, that is definitely, as engineering leader, we need to pay attention, and as well as security leaders, we need to pay attention given the shift. I just want to call that out.
Mm-hmm. And so in an area that's clearly evolving and it's kind of being developed as we move, what are the lessons you've all learned so far in terms of deploying those guardrails and building that kind of consensus around this being an important topic to protect now rather than in a few months' time?
So it is actually like keying off of what Bhawna mentioned, and I think some of the prior talks touched upon this as well, where data itself is really the foundation for enabling all this technology. So to that end, we spent a fair amount of time building out an annotations framework where we can classify information both within structured and our data lakes. We've also been building out lineage so that we can now trace where that information and data stores. And the idea there is, over time, as that becomes more and more robust, that can be used to guide various LLMs and Gen AI techniques on top of that, so that there's less chance of either hallucinating or commingling of information, especially when you start getting into customer segmentation concerns or personal information. There are ways that we can isolate that, not just from the traditional access control approach, but by tying it very closely with the data and it kind of guiding and tuning that. The second approach is a fairly, I think, common one, I suspect. It's that kind of cross-functional working group between legal and looking at all the different ways we're going to define a whole responsible AI initiative and tracing those from transparency, moderation and governance, and so forth, and bringing those down into the engineering world of how do we meet those different requirements in a consistent way, so that we're trying to balance how do you move so quickly and realize the potential here while also keeping in context kind of those broader risks.
Yeah, and to add, absolutely, and to add to that, I would say, if you're just starting in the journey, start with bringing your same security principles, which is secure by design principles, and bring data into that fold. So many times, and I talk to many of my peer leaders, it's not top of mind and they have not considered it. So that's the step one, bringing your same security principles and bring data into that fold. So that's number one. Number two, things that my colleague here just shared, absolutely, those are all the things that you need to build. Something that I call it data development lifecycle, just like we have software development lifecycle. So bringing right checkpoints, right guardrails at different parts of your data pipeline or data development pipeline is the step two. There are a lot of nuances there as well, just as you have nuances in security development software development lifecycle, as well as there are a lot of tools. And I guarantee you there's a lot more tools coming for that stage. So keep an eye out as you look into it, but certainly paying attention is the step one. Step two is bringing your same security principles and bringing data under it. That's definitely important. That's the step one or two, whatever. And then, of course, the three is to now look into your data pipeline end to end and see what other protection and guardrails that you need to bring.
Yeah. So I agree with Bhawna, right? So security principle doesn't change. The same threat vectors is just magnified out here, right? So if you look at Gen AI, one of the biggest challenges is the unknown. We really don't know what is out there, right? We are learning almost every day. There's a new vulnerability coming up on a regular basis. How do we protect it, right? So there are a few things, like as Bhawna mentioned, data is extremely important, right? Previously, last year, when we were doing our things were much easier. You had you take a document and put in a vector DB, someone asks a prompt, get the context, send it to the LLM, and response comes back. You do basic validation on the prompt and the reply. But if you see right now, today, the things are so complex. There's a workflow, there's an orchestration. You have agents, plugin, there are API calls you make. And every time you invoke something, you send data and get back, there's a possibility that could be exploited, right? There could be data leakage. So how do you make sure all the right guardrails and validations are in each touch point, Once you have put all of them together, then you have to make sure there is a good observability. You have an auditing feature out there so that you know what's going on. And last but most important is, no matter how much you trust the AI and ML models, LLM models, everything, you can't substitute that for human. You have to keep the human in the loop and make sure you can react to it and do the right correction of that.
And double-clicking on something that you mentioned there around the kind of specialized tooling for generative AI, how have you, or what have you come across that's kind of most piqued your interest and you think has been most instrumental in building this thinking around securitizing generative AI models?
So for us, from the security startup space, there's hundreds, if not thousands, I suspect, of security vendors trying to offer, we can offer an LM security option. And as a buyer, the hard part is knowing, okay, which are the ones that either have the right approach or will have staying power and we're not gonna have to replace. And where we are in our journey is still early enough that we're still focusing on some of the fundamentals around how to have high quality data in the first place. What we realize is some of those techniques likely, by working together with the engineering teams, have greater impact than trying to bring in like that security tool after the fact. So some examples to this, where we're building out these customer success bots. If you're afraid of the bot potentially giving a non-deterministic answer, the 1 out of 10 times, so you turn the flag on where you run that query 3 times, and then you pick the winner of that. But that's fairly expensive. And some of the techniques that security solutions or security startups are offering is essentially another NLP or another LM sitting on top of that. So now you're talking around running these queries 4, 5, 6 times just to try to have high quality data. That's incredibly expensive. So the other general approach, I think some of the other speakers mentioned this, how do you introduce the human in the loop? So instead of allowing the free form responses, and it's very, very difficult from a security perspective to secure, we tie it back with essentially copying what Perplexity has done with citations. So you have to go back to either a pre-canned answer, I'm unhappy with my order. Well, these are the orders that we have on record. Which is the one you're concerned about? What's your concern of what the issues were? And you can start to dig into those details and not just leave it open-ended of, we're so sorry, here's a coupon code for you to go ahead and use. And we found by engaging and confirming that back with the human, it really directs down the responses to be factually based and not giving the LLMs that opportunity to go down the wrong path. So it's not necessarily a security technique, but we think about just partnering closely with the engineering teams early as they're designing these and putting in place those good tests, as also been discussed previously, right? Then that helps build that quality foundation up front. And the hope is, as we continue to monitor the results over time, we'll get better insight into, how are both good actors as well as malicious actors using these systems, and then how do we begin to iterate from there?
And to add that, if you haven't looked at your ML release pipeline, let's say, I think it's time to look at that release pipeline. I will not be surprised if someone comes and says that my ML engineers release code directly to production. I have seen that in my past roles where it happened, and I had to fix that. I know we laugh at it because we talk about production, but it's not untrue. So I think starting and understanding your ML pipeline and how the whole process looks like, what your MLOps platform look like and all, and making sure the security checks are there, that's the step one. From there, I mean, to be honest, the answer for different tooling is that they're all in very early stage. The stark contrast right now in the big companies offering LLM solutions and the startups that are coming up with solutions is that the big companies are just throwing out that solution with less checkpoints. I mean, think about Copilot, right? The SOC 2 compliance came much, much later, just recently. And we are still adopting it. But the startups, there's so many who are looking at this particular space in very, very interesting dimensions, starting with data itself, but also the whole pipeline to say, do we have the model observability? Do we have can I look at the PyTorch itself or notebook and see if there are some code that could lead to vulnerability? So there's a lot of very, very interesting solutions. I met with few already. And I think as they grow a little, we will have some more adoption of those solutions, but they're thinking in the right direction, and I'm happy that they're thinking in that right direction. So solutions are coming, is the way.
Yeah, so I agree with you, right? So if you take GenAI as such today, right, as I mentioned, there's a lot of unknowns and things are evolving so fast. I don't feel there is going to be a silver bullet, a single tool which is going to solve it. Right? The only way to solve it is to have a layered approach. And this is not very different than what we have been already doing our traditional security. Right? So there are, if you take in the foundation model, the cloud providers, they're already providing a pretty good, decent validation, but they are not enough. So you need to start building on top of it. So what we did was we looked into what are the challenges we are facing, then we got some point solutions which are solving that specific problem. Then wherever there was a gap, we started adding our own stuff on top of it, and auditing, as I mentioned, is also important. And eventually what happened is now we got a framework where we can swap in and out any point solution whenever we want to. If a new thing comes in, we can just add it, try it out, doesn't work, we can replace it. I think this is how it's going to go for at least for the next few years, till we really understand what are the limitations and what are the ways this LLM behave.
And conscious of time, I feel there's a lot more that we could cover, but maybe as a final question, I guess and it's a fast-moving space, so I'm sure there's interesting reflections, but what do you wish you'd known 12 months ago that would have put you in a better position now?
I wish we had engaged and started to experiment from a security team's perspective with a lot of these LLM tools directly. And we're lucky in some sense that our internal infrastructure team did that with our own Playground UI, and we're able to leverage a lot of those learnings, but we still feel behind, and no big surprise, the space is just evolving so fast. So it's been fascinating to try to not only catch up, but also see how we can learn what's coming around the corner and to try to predict there.
Yep.
I would have loved to know that this technology would be available a year back, so that I would have been ready to adopt it more sooner than when I did. I think the value add is definitely there. Conversely, as we did see, or I did see the adoption in different places, the learnings that came from there and all of that, I think we could have learned that sooner and faster. But I think experimentation is the path forward, so we are on that path.
So I've seen many disruptive technologies in my career, and honestly, I've never seen anything like GenAI. And if you go back 12 months ago, there are unknowns today also. So I don't think I would have done anything different. I think we all are shaping and we are defining how to use GenAI. I think the only way I would say is either you're in or out. You can't be in the middle. So either you wait, I don't think we have the option. So what I
thought the only option is you better be in.
Better in. Yeah, and I think we had to evolve as this evolves, and we adjust and adapt to it. That's the only thing I think so.